Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dean Singleton, Dean of the Lubin School of Business. I'd like to welcome you to this Dean's Roundtable. I'm pleased to have with us today Ms. Shonette Carew, an alum of the BBA in Hotel, Hospitality, and Tourism Management program at Pace. She currently serves as Strategic Director of Marketing and Communications for Nemours Children's Health, one of the largest integrated pediatric health systems in the United States. She assumed this role in early 2020 during the COVID crisis and is responsible for strategy and execution of all marketing and communication activities in Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey for the hospital satellite locations and their partnerships. Prior to this role, Ms. Carew worked in hospitality for over 20 years and served as a Vice President of Marketing for a number of organizations, including Hollywood Casino Perryville, Valley Forge Casino Resort, Wilmington Trust, and Harrah's Casino and Racetrack in multiple locations. She's also served in various operation and marketing roles for Millennium Broadway Hotel and Conference. As I mentioned, she earned a BBA in Hotel, Hospitality, and Tourism Management at the Lubin School of Business, New York City campus in 1996. She also holds a Master of Management in Hospitality MBA from the Cornell Hotel School and ESSEC Business School in Paris. Please welcome Shonette Carew to the Dean's Roundtable. Ms. Carew, I'd like to begin by giving you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about your career, about your story, and how you've been so successful in your role. So it's all yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Dean Singleton and others. It's a pleasure to be back. I haven't had a chance to do a small group like this with Pace. And so this is quite a privilege since I'm 20 plus years out at this point. So that's really exciting. So as Dean mentioned, I graduated from Pace in 1996. And we were just talking about it. At the time, I was one of a handful of people who lived on campus. And so I have a very unique experience because I lived in Manhattan, in Maria's Tower, when it was just Maria's Tower. And so I started out actually as an accounting major. So if I tell you how I ended up getting to Pace, I was a recruit of a program called Career Opportunities in the Accounting Profession when I was in high school. And they came around to all of the high schools in the city. I went to high school on 33rd and Park. And for those who were interested in accounting, minority candidates, you could apply for a program that gave you a week of exposure to all the types of accounting, and you got to live on campus, and we got to live in Pleasantville. So that's sort of how I ended up through Pace. And I stayed really connected with the professors. And as I applied to colleges, Pace was one of the ones that was on the top of my list. And at the time, I was so sure I was going to be a CPA. Like if you had asked me, my path was clear. CPA, big accounting firm, travel, private, I was clear. And then I got into school and I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. And so the good part is I think that my time at Pace really helped open me up. I was an accounting major for 2 solid years. I made it all the way up, I think, I feel like it was tax 2. And then I decided this just was not for me. And part of the experience, especially for students, is to figure out not just what you're good at, but what you're not good at and what you don't want to do. And the Pace experience, I think, is really unique. Every semester and every summer, I had a job through the work study program, or I don't remember what it's called at the time, but I had a real job. So whether it was on Wall Street or in Midtown or at an accounting firm or at a law firm, I was able to sort of practice those skills that I was using at Pace. And so my time at Pace was really, again, very, very rich with academic experiences, but also because I was fortunate enough to live on campus, I also participated in lots of student organizations. And that's how I really got to meet folks. And so I am a Jamaican woman of Caribbean descent. And so I was active in the Caribbean students. I was active in the Black students. I was active in the Student Senate. I joined a sorority. I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. You name it. I was like an assistant RA. I worked in the dorms when we had parties. And so for a place like Pace New York City campus, sometimes it's difficult to acclimate because there's a lot of commuters, right? And really where you saw folks was in the cafeteria. And so you weren't going home with most of your friends because they were taking the subway places, and I was going upstairs to the 12th floor. I think I lived on the 12th floor all 4 years, different rooms. But it was a really great experience for me. And I also realized after I graduated, the benefit of what PACE can offer is that you get these real life experiences well before your peers. And so in my chosen major, right, I did the accounting thing, I tried that. And even though I did well, I didn't like it. And I thought to myself, by my second year, when I was a sophomore, I remember meeting with my advisor and my professor advisor, who at the time, I'll never forget, John Aheto, he was an accounting professor. And he said, why are you going to leave? You have great grades. And I was like, yeah, but it's not the grades. I can do the work. I just don't like it. That's not an easy thing to say as an 18, 19-year-old to the professor, not only who is helping you academically, but he was part of the reason I came to PACE, because that co-op program I told you about, he was one of the big sponsors. And so he identified people and said, if you want to come to PACE, let me show you how to get in here. And so I owed him a lot. And so it felt, not really like a betrayal, but I really felt bad. And then I went to the head of the Department of Management at the time, and he said, listen, if you want to try this, now is the time to try it. Don't want to wait till you leave to try these things. And that's what made me really decide. And so I was still doing my core courses. And what I ended up doing was using all of my electives for the things I had already done to start focusing on management and hotel administration, which is what I loved. And my work study, my senior year, turned into my first real job. But I will tell you, even though I switched from accounting, the reason that I was successful in my first real job was I was the only one who knew how to read a P&L. To this day, when I have managers and I'm training people to take, manager roles, director roles, I'm like, so show me how you read a P&L, because it doesn't matter what the business is. If you cannot read the P&L, you cannot run your business. I don't care if the business is $100,000 or $200 million. And so I will tell you that I feel like I was a better and stronger person coming right out of school than most of my peers, because that was a part of my experience. So for those of you who think it's ridiculous now, trust me, it works. It's a big part of it. And especially if you want to run businesses. I'm a marketing major, right? Like I came out and I did something else different. And I love what I do, and I'll explain how I switched. But the base is still the same. Whether I'm running the operation or whether I'm running my marketing budget, you still need to understand where the money's coming from, where it should go, and how you should get it paid. I've seen very, very smart people trip up that way. And so I feel like that's one of the foundational things that PACE did and does very well for everyone in terms of that. And so if you think about that, I think that's a really fortunate place. And sometimes I remember my first couple jobs, no one asked me to read a P&L. Like when I was in school, no one was asking the intern to read the P&L, right? I was doing the small jobs, but I was listening and I was learning and I was asking a lot of really good questions. So for those of you who do have internships and those of you who have connections to PACE, I will tell you, even if the job isn't what you want, listen to understand what in the role and what the other person maybe that you're working for is doing that you like, and take that with you, right? So everywhere you go, you're collecting just a little bit of what you like and what you don't like. I had an amazing opportunity to intern with, at the time, it was just JP Morgan. This is pre-Chase. On Wall Street, I was the only one from PACE selected, right? It was, they do Ivy recruiting, all of that. It was spectacular. And I remember leaving after those 6 or 8 weeks in the summer. And I was like, if I never wear a blue suit in my life, it will be too much. But I knew I was good at it, but I didn't like it. So those are the things that I counsel the young people that I talk to right now about doing. Don't worry about the title, worry about the learning. You have your whole life to worry about the title. Worry about the learning, because that will help you in the long run. So I will say that. I will tell you, like I said, my first job, I was an intern at the Millennium Broadway Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. And I was an intern at the Millennium downtown that doesn't even exist anymore, because that was pre 9/11, right? And that's how I started in the hotel side of the business. And when I graduated, because I could read a P&L, I went from being the intern and the person who opened the business center in the hotel to the manager. And again, it was a manager of 3 people, and I did most of the work myself. but it was still an opportunity to run a really small business. And I stayed there for 5 years, and most of my friends were coming out of college, going to private accounting firms, CPA firms, making a ton more money than I did. But in the first 3 to 5 years, most of them were burnt out from traveling and doing all the things that CPAs do, right, when you're right out of school. And I was still at the hotel growing my career. And so a lot of times, especially as I look now, when I hire folks, no matter the level, I want to see progression. You don't have to jump jobs. You can progress just by doing different things inside of a company. So I know that a lot of people feel like, well, I have to move so I can get the next title. Title doesn't matter to me. I'm actually reading what they've done and I'm asking you questions about the work you've done. And so think about that in terms of, am I stretching? Am I growing? Am I doing that? And so after a couple of years, I knew I wanted to go back to grad school. And I decided, having, graduated, I wanted to get a secondary education. And I applied to school. But I also had a number of years between undergrad and graduate, 3.5 years. And I also, unless you're going for a professional degree right away, I do recommend that folks spend some time working before they go back and get their graduate degree. Unless you're doing like that 5-year CPA, that's a different thing. Just go straight through and get your BBA and your MBA. But work in the field, because by the time you get to your graduate education, it will allow you to have richer, more thoughtful questions, and you'll appreciate it that much more. I know I did. I don't think I could have if I'd gone straight from Pace to Cornell. I don't know if the experience would have been the same for me. So that is something I will say. And while I did get a chance to go and study internationally, it never even crossed my mind when I was at Pace. Not because it wasn't offered. I was focused on different things. Pace is a very unique school, and New York City is about as international as it gets, right? So for those of you, you're like, why would I go anywhere else? Everybody else is coming to me. If you have the chance to study abroad, it really does not just make you more marketable, but it makes you more personally. I grew more living in another country, working in another country, going to school in another country than I realized. And so again, my nieces and nephews, I want them to do it in undergrad now because it makes such a difference. I hate that COVID sort of messed people up in a certain way, but it doesn't mean that you still can't go and have these experiences. And so I graduated with a dual degree, both from Cornell and the business school in Paris that we went to as a part of that program. And then I ended up going into hotel in the casinos. So people ask me, how did you get into casino? No one in my family gambled. We weren't like, that's just not what I did. But I was really interested in the company and the work. And again, you'll hear this theme with me. I'm a curious person by nature, and I ask a lot of questions. And I'm also willing to take a risk. For those of you who are generally more cautious, it doesn't mean you take a blind risk. It doesn't mean you jump in with your eyes closed into something you're not sure about. Think about the calculated risk because they will really help your career. And so I moved after graduating. I moved to Louisiana, and not just to Louisiana, to the smallest town you can absolutely think about in Louisiana. And I was fortunate enough that I got to do a lot in a short period of time. When most of my friends who I was graduating with were going to Las Vegas, so they could say that they worked in Vegas in these big fancy casinos, I was like, well, I'm moving to Lake Charles, Louisiana. I don't know about you, but I didn't know where it was until I moved there. It's about this big, and it's an hour from Houston. It's about 30 minutes from the border of Texas and Louisiana. Louisiana's like this, and Lake Charles is right here on the boot. New Orleans is over here. It wasn't New Orleans. I was over here. But what it allowed me to do was I did a lot. I got to do way more. I got to meet and experience exchanges with the executives in my company 10 times more than my friends in Vegas who had 5 different levels before they got to the top. I saw my general manager every day. He would call me for lunch, right? So I got to develop a relationship with really senior people, not because of my position, but because of where I was and what I was doing. And so I know that helped me get my next role. And so I spent, almost 10 years with Harrah's, which is now Caesars Entertainment, went through 2 acquisitions through the process, and I moved 5 times in 10 years. Again, remember I told you about taking a risk. I've lived in Las Vegas, Lake Charles, Louisiana, Shreveport, Louisiana, Bossier City, Louisiana, Council Bluffs, Iowa, Omaha, Nebraska, and then Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is where I live in the region now. And each of those times, what I was doing was growing my experience. So I got in the hotel side, but I wanted marketing. That's what I went to grad school for. I wanted to get in there. And, you know, you sort of make deals with people. Okay, I'll do this for a year because you need this. My next promotion will be this. So I wasn't saying I was going to leave. I remember one of my mentors said, look, if you want to leave, you can leave. But if you want to wait, you have more equity and more value because you've done something that they need. When it's time for you to get what you need, you have leverage. Sometimes we don't think about that. So I didn't necessarily want to run another hotel after grad school because I'm like, I went to school, I don't want to do this. But this is what they needed. And I'm like, you know what? I can do this for a year. When comes time for my promotion, I want this. And a year later, not even, it was about 9 months, they were like, hey, there's this really great thing coming up. We want you to consider it. I got to create an inaugural position with 25 other people around the country. That was a new position that was a cross between service, operations, and marketing. I wouldn't have seen that a year before. And so I was in the right place at the right time. And then after 2 years of doing that, I was ready to then take a senior role in marketing because I was at that point, I had gotten the work and I was ready for the title. So that's when title mattered. It didn't matter before that. That's when I was like, okay, I want to be this now. So I don't think I could have done that without the leverage. And it doesn't mean that you need to let people guide you or walk on you, right? Especially for the women in the room, because sometimes we're afraid to speak up. It just means what's important to me. And if title is important to you, that's different. It wasn't important to me. I wanted to make sure I was doing work, make sure I was leading people, and I wanted what I did to matter. I wanted things, I didn't want to be pushing paper and doing reports for people. I wanted to be making a difference. And that's what mattered to me. So I will say that that was really one of the things that took place. And then, you know, just like, honestly, all career women, you get to a point in your life where you're like, okay, I want to be able to balance. I want to have a life. I don't necessarily want to be married to my job. And I left the industry for a couple of years because I thought, okay, I loved it, but I was doing a lot of nights, a lot of weekends, a lot of parties in hospitality on the marketing side, which was fabulous and very glamorous. But it doesn't bode well for you to have a balance. And so I went into banking and thought, okay, I'm going to try and transfer skills. So all of you need to know that you can create in the work that you do a set of skills that is transferable between industries and between positions, right? So somebody once gave me some great advice. You can progress all the way up. And so you can do position to position to position, or you can go laterally. You can be really good at this, and then you're a good leader. So you move and you lead another group that maybe you don't have the functional expertise in, and then you lead that. So in my career, I've done both that. I've done horizontally growth and then vertically grown. And I left to go try a different industry, right? Because you want to make sure that you can do the things that you're trying to do. And I left and went to banking. And while I was good at it, again, it was sort of like what happened when I went to JP Morgan. After a while, I'm like, this is not a nice cultural fit. I can do the work, I just don't like it. And I left and went back to hospitality, where I really enjoyed it and got a chance to not only balance having a family, because my first son was born, but also did the work that I loved. And sometimes we're afraid to speak up because we think, oh my God, how can I be a VP or a director running a major department and not be there 5 days a week? I didn't have a choice. And so I asked for what I wanted. That's probably the bravest thing I've ever done in my life. In that interview, when I knew the job was going to be mine, telling my soon-to-be boss, I don't think I can do this 5 days a week. So if you want me, we're going to have to work something out. And he said, oh, is that it? Yeah, sure. I still remember his words to this day, literally, because I thought I was going to die when those words came out of my mouth. Oh, sure. Is that all? Yeah, sure. I mean, again, it was so laissez-faire to him, but to me, it was the world, because I was going back into something I wanted to do, something I'd done 80 hours a week comfortably for 10 years. And I was like, I can't do 80 hours a week. I have a 10-month-old. So all they can say is no. And I remember my husband said to me, if he says no, you're fine, right? Because I'm telling you, I knew I was going to breeze everything else. I could do the work. It was fine. I was paranoid to ask that question at the end of the interview. And he was, oh, sure. Is that all you want? Yeah. As if it was nothing. And I remember telling him, he was like, I knew we were going to hire you once you sat down. I just was hoping that you would be able to do. He was like, I just wanted to know what it would take to make you come on board. That was one of the nicest things that anybody's ever said to me. Right. And so I came on board part-time as a key leader in the organization to make sure that I could manage my life, and negotiated when I would be full-time. So give me a year. This is what I want to do. Let me balance. And this is what it looks like. Now, I think it's just a given in this pandemic. And so I think especially for people coming out, there is an understanding that was never there before. There were people who asked me, how did they let you become a VP 3 days a week? Because it was not a, now I think that people to get, especially female leaders, you have to get creative. If you want the right person, work it out. That's all I say. And the people, my people who come to me with questions, I'm like, is she the right candidate? Figure it out, make it happen. Right? Balance the things that you need to balance to get the right person. Because I'd rather have the right person on board 3 days a week than the wrong person on board 6 days a week. Just so you know, it's harder. So those are just some life lessons and some things I think about. And then after 7 years doing what I loved, again, I got the itch to try something new, which again, I hope you're hearing a theme. And I'm like, I wonder if I can do this somewhere else. And got a completely random call from a friend of mine who said, hey, I just got a recruiter call. And I told her, hey, I know somebody who'd be amazing for a children's hospital. Do you want to talk to her? I didn't call them. They called me. And I was like, listen, I don't know anything about hospitals. I don't know anything about children. I work with old people and I work with money and casinos and adults. But what I am is good at marketing. What I am is I know my job. And so again, remember I told you about that set of skills. They were looking for a set of skills and a set of leadership qualities that I have. And I took the job, took a leap of faith after 7 years with a company and 20 years in an industry, and turned in my notice. And then the world collapsed 1 week later. And I was like, what have I just done? Literally that same feeling of dread. The week that was my last week with the casino, we had to shut down because the governor's orders, it was shelter in place. I was shutting down my casino with my other leaders the week I was leaving. And my boss said, I gave my notice and the world broke. Right? So, but I started here in a pandemic at home, trying to figure out how to learn and lead and develop relationships over Teams and WebEx. And a year and a half later, I could tell you that I did it, and it was exhausting and it was hard. And my then second grader was home at virtual school, which was not ideal. The 4-year-old only had part-time care. Like when I tell you it was the worst possible scenario, but apparently I'm alive and apparently I lasted. So if I can do it, you can too. And again, I love what I do. So now the work that I used to do in the casino that was fun and exciting, now at the outset of the work that I do, I literally see how we're creating things that save people's lives. It is really quite wonderful. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. And like I said, I'm glad to answer questions about any part of it, whether it's the PACE experience or the work experience or the balancing life experience completely.
Thank you. Thank you for that great story. I have a great story to tell. No question about that. I'd like to open the floor now for questions from the audience.
Anyone who has questions can send them to me in the chat directly, or you can raise your hand, the hand icon, and ask them yourselves, whatever you're more comfortable with.
And while they're coming in, let me start. If I could ask you one, you talked about how things were, with COVID and all that kind of stuff. How has that affected, you came into your current position during COVID, right? Or at the beginning of COVID. How has that affected your work as a communications person? I mean, put things on its head, I guess, right?
So most hospitals have what they call, they have a very military-like structure, and right, because it's safety and health. And so when I started, they had instituted something called incident command, which is, and the military, it's like your commanding officer, you meet every morning and every evening to survey what's going on, what's the problem, where are the solutions. And the person in marketing and communications, my whole team and I, we are called the public information officers. We are at every one of those so that if there's messages that need to go out, we have the firsthand knowledge, we can craft the message and send it out. I jumped into a job where every day I had a meeting at 7:30 and 5:30. This was like literally, no matter where, they would ask questions sometimes and I would write it down and then I would call someone and go, what is that? I have no idea what she's asking for. So it was exhausting. And from a communications perspective, we have about 50 locations here between Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. We have 1 hospital, 3 surgery centers, and then 40 something sites. And we also have the same thing with Florida, 2 hospitals, about 40 sites all around Central Florida, Jacksonville, Pensacola, and Central Florida. And so what I understand is, because I didn't know any different, my counterpart, who is the regional director down there, she and I talk all the time. That was not normal. Apparently pre-COVID, Florida and the North and the South region didn't really have to talk because they just handled what they handled. But when you're working in a COVID environment and to make sure protocol is the same, all of those are the same. So COVID really sort of helped most communications professionals in terms of getting connected. And then I just learned a ton. So I think had I started in a time that was less stressful, I wouldn't have been immersed in the organization the way I was. If that makes sense. Immersed, overwhelmed, whatever, pick the word.
I figured there was something to do with being overwhelmed. It had to be, given
Yeah.
that environment, right? Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah, I really, really get to a personal degree the toll on healthcare and healthcare workers. When like just going in and seeing the trepidation that was happening. And again, children's hospitals were impacted very differently in the start of the pandemic than they are now. So it was we've had what we call it, we had a little wave and now we're having a big wave, right? So it's coming on the side, but it's been a challenge.
Well,
I have a question, if I can ask it really quick. You talked about transferable skills, and I know that sometimes that's a concept that might seem a little bit abstract to some students, or it's just one of those words that they get told so many times that they just don't understand anymore what it means. So I was just wondering if you could give some specific examples of transferable skills you took with you to banking.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest things that I do right now is a lot of my job. So I have sort of 2 key parts of my role. One is awareness for the enterprise, right? So getting your message out there, whether it is in traditional media, digital media, whatever, so people know who Nemours is, the names of the hospitals, what we do. But then there's also driving revenue, right? So whether you drive revenue for a casino, you drive revenue for a hospital, or you drive revenue for a bank, it's about acquisition and retention. So those of you who've been in any marketing class know those 2 words, right? You are acquiring customers in some way, shape, or form, and then you are doing things to retain customers in some way, shape, or form. I now know how to do that for a hospital. I did not know how to do that for a hospital before I didn't even know what acquisition was in a hospital. I'm like, how do you find sick kids? That's weird. I knew how to acquire casino people. I knew how to acquire banking, right? People with certain number of assets to go into a wealth division. I now know how to acquire and retain consumers and patients, right? So that when you talk about transferable skills, that's it. Also, I've been fortunate in my career to build marketing teams. And so I was also brought on to create and build the team that we had to get this work done. So who am I looking for? What am I looking for? I have people, I hired somebody to work with me who had an app background, right? So we have our own app. So she had that as a part of her job, but she's also working with our primary care. You're a good marketer, you're a good marketer. Do you have good client skills? Do you have good communication skills? Do you have good follow-up? And can you read a P&L? Remember that? So that I was building that team. So I got to hire, there's 6 on my team now and 3 have been in the last year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have a couple of questions in the chat. The first one being, how did your past experience with your former work help you for the future jobs?
So like I said, that's the transferable skills. I remember having a conversation in the interview. I actually found it really easy to sort of dot the lines between where I was and where I was going. And I'll tell you why. Gaming and entertainment is a highly complex, highly regulated industry, right? I had a lot of rules I had to follow to do the things I did in the casino. There's a hospital. Oh my goodness, there's a rule and a policy and a process for everything. They may be different, but it's the same concept of following the rules to get to something else. I will also say that part of the value of being a casino executive, there's a sense of urgency, right? Like, we know how to respond, because when you don't respond, you lose people. When I'm ready to go out and have a good time, if my salesperson or my executive host doesn't respond, I'm just going to go to the one who responds first and says, sure, I got dinner in a room for you, right? I'm on my way. Who's going to pick up first? So that sense of urgency and the sense of responsiveness is also something, right, that I took with me here. And then literally, like I said, just how I do my job. How am I looking at the audiences? How am I managing the budget to attain the goals? How am I actually building relationships? I used to do sales training in the casino. And while I'm not selling the casino, while I'm not selling the hospital outside, there's a team that does that. I'm actually selling what marketing does inside, because healthcare is probably 10 years behind most industries. I'm learning that now. And so the value of marketing and doing what they do, it's not as easily transferable. In the casino, they did nothing without talking to marketing. I'm now getting the healthcare leaders to understand that. So my CEO and I are now BFFs. And he's like, hey, Shonette, we're doing a strategic conversation. Can you join us? That never happened before I got here, apparently, right? So it's just a different mindset in different industries. So it's me learning and understanding where the opportunities were, and then trying to make sure that I help to fill those.
Another question was, is there something about the marketing industry that you didn't know prior to beginning to work in it?
About marketing, yes. Marketing means the same thing, but it applies differently across every industry, every region, every place. And so, again, I came from hospitality and operations. So I like things, I like running things. Marketing, you have a lot of influence, but sometimes no direct. I can't make people do their jobs. When I was in operations and I ran the business, I could make people do their jobs. Here, I have to influence how people do their jobs. And then I'm telling the story of why you're going to pick whatever organization. So the marketing is the storytelling. And whether you do it digitally or communication wise, or however you tell the story, it's about understanding the story. So one of the things I do right now is I'm very closely connected to the heads of the operations, so I can understand where is our research, right? So our head of cancer is doing some amazing cutting edge research with childhood leukemia and lymphoma. Guess what? Guess what story I'm telling? Guess what makes us different? So my job is to find what makes us different, create and craft the story, and put it where people will hear it. It's simple. I did the exact same thing in the casino, but it was what makes me different than the casino down the road? Why would you come, and what do you get when you come? And tell the story.
Tell me how the stories are different. How did you differentiate the casinos? Come to my casino and you'll win more? I doubt that. What did you do? How did you do that? Seriously.
I would tell people, they're like, you must know how to do this. I'm like, so the name on the building would be Shonette's, if I had those answers. But part of what differentiates it is the thing I loved about my job, which is, again, I will tell you my PACE background. So I'm a data junkie. While marketing is very fluffy and people see all the front side, in the casino, 70% of what I did was data driven. Everybody comes in and they play with a card, right? The card uses CRM to understand your behavior and predict what you should be doing. And I would create offers based on that predicted response. That's cool. So I would be able to wake up in the morning, look at my phone, and have from the night before revenue numbers against a forecast, against a projection. So, right, you do a budget the year before, then you do a reforecast. So we always had two numbers, and then we had actual. And within the actual, I could see where the revenue came from, and where did it meet? Because it's not enough just to say I met my goal. Did I meet my goal the way I said I wanted to? And, to Dean Singleton, that's how the differentiation was. So who am I? Who is my target audience? And how am I driving them? So not every casino wants the sexy $1 million table players. That can be risky. So the casinos that I ran that I was good at were more what we call locals environment, somewhere where you went 3 to 5 times a month. And so how do you keep those people engaged, keep the share of wallet, and make it such that it's a consistent experience time and time again? So we used to joke about it, like I build the cheers that they want to come to. Does that help?
Excellent. That's great. I bet that is fun to do that kind of stuff too. Yeah.
Shonette, I have a question for you. Are there any failures that you have personally or indirectly seen as a professional in your early years after graduation that you could give advice on or shed some light on to our students?
Oh gosh, I have failed more than I have succeeded. So let's pick a good one, right? So if you are afraid to fail, you're not going to succeed. I will tell you one of my very first experiences when I started my first manager job at the Millennium Broadway. Oh God, well, I was like 22, zero experience, like not even sure what I was doing, but I was like, I'm going to try really hard. And about a year into that job, so a year after I graduated Pace, our hotel went through unionization. Now, mind you, remember I told you I interned there in college. So I had been working there a year before I actually became a manager, and then was a manager for a year. And so many of the people I managed and went out with and hung out with and ate with and partied with, they were my friends, but I was in management, and some people were not, like a lot of them weren't. And so one of the biggest, and I realize this now just because I was young, my friends were going through an experience with unionization, whether you agree or disagree. So this is not I agree with it or I disagree with it. I, as a new manager, was deathly afraid, because one of the things they tell you is anything that you say as a manager can be used by the union in literally against you. So if you say the wrong thing, the union can use that and call an automatic vote. So it is a hard road. And so I had friends who I would hang out. So my second job was assistant director of the front office. And I had a bunch of guys at the bell stand and the concierge and the front door that were my friends, but I was managing them. And they were like, is this a good thing, Shonette? What should we do? I literally, instead of guiding and using language, I literally just stopped talking to people because I was afraid to say the wrong thing. And I know, in my heart of hearts, I know this. I know I jeopardized relationships, and I know that people who trusted me, right? So I had people who were probably going to be there, right? A lot of older guys that I worked with, they were probably that was their job. They were going to be there a really long time. I couldn't say anything good or bad, and I could have guided them in ways that I just wasn't familiar with. And so that was probably one of the things I would say that I was most regretful of, because I really should have gone back and got the information and shared. But man, those New York City unions are strong and tough. And I guarantee the fear of God was in me. I was like, I'm not going to be the one to get the card pulled and get the union called. Like, so if we had said the wrong thing, the union can come back and say, this manager is against us, and they use these words. And if they can prove it, immediate vote, right? And you put yourself in a predicament. So I would say that was one. And then when I was working in Nebraska, right? When you think about those of us who are just passionate and all in, we were opening up a casino in the Midwest in the the end of the winter. It was February, March. And I remember at one point, I literally worked myself into the ground physically. The day after we opened the casino, did the big bang, had the, Orange County motorcycles, had the showgirls, did all of this. I ended up slipping and falling. And again, didn't hurt myself really, but I was down in bed for a week because I had not listened to my body. So, right? Sometimes you're like, no, I can't, no one else can do my work. So I have to be there 16 hours a day, and I have to get up and I do this. And I literally think I did 16-hour days for probably 2 weeks. Not okay. The work will always be there. You will not. And so I'm not great at it, but I'm much better about going, I'm pretty poop. So guess what? We're going to cancel these meetings because I'm not going to be useful to you. I'll be there, but I'm not going to help you. And so listening to when I am exhausted, especially here, our doctors start really early. So they have patients at 7:30. So guess who wants a 7 a.m. meeting? Oh, Shonette, we can meet with you. How about 7 o'clock on Thursday? My day goes till 5:30 or 6:30. So I can have a 7 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. day, 3 days a week. And then what I do is I try and block Friday morning, or I try and block Thursday, or I say, while I know that works for your schedule, it doesn't work for mine. And that's a brave conversation to have with somebody who's the head of a very powerful division. And he's like, oh, okay, well, let me see if something else works. But I wasn't comfortable with that in the very beginning. I'm like, I have to say yes every time they want to meet at 7. Now I'm like, and I have 2 small children. 7 o'clock in my house is chaos to get them out the door. There's socks, there's lunch boxes. It is not a pretty sight. So when I do have a 7 a.m. meeting, it has to be on the phone. And sometimes you can hear my colleagues are like, I'm like, yep, they're getting ready. Sorry, if you want me to talk, you're gonna have to hear the background. Mom, where's the cereal? I don't know, it's where you left it. So that's what my house is like at 7. But again, sometimes I have to, because right, that's the only time I can get my clients together to get the information I need to do the work that I want to do for them. But I do try and balance that whenever I can. So I would say those are 2, just again, strong failures that I realize and I recognize, and I've learned from.
I have a question.
Yes.
So do you have any advice on how to find like your specific passion or industry in business?
Yes. Find what you don't like. John, I took every job, and I told you, JP Morgan, everyone was like, oh my God, you got that internship. It was so coveted. And 3 weeks in, I was like, this is the most boring damn job I've ever done. So you have to be ready to take things, read it, try it, and like now is the time to do it. And then as you, like I said, one of the things that if you get into a company that values you as an individual, right? And they're like, you know what, John's a really sharp guy. He's a good kid, right? Okay, can I try this? In order for me to try this, what do you need? Right? I have people in other departments come to me all the time and they're like, Shonette, we're really interested in marketing. How we get into marketing? I'm like, have you taken a class? Have you done a side project? Have you volunteered on the marketing committee for something else? That's how you get in. So it doesn't matter to me that you work in another department. It matters to me that you've tried and you can express it other than the fact that, oh, I like to do flyers. That's not what I do. Right? And so it is important. So that's what you want to do. You want to look around, make relationships so you can see what other people are doing, and then find out like, hey, how can I work for you? How can I work with you? How can I learn from you? And a good leader and a good mentor will say, this is how. They'll give you a path to that.
Yeah, to follow up with that, do you have also any advice on how to develop yourself as a leader and maybe as like a future manager? Like, is there any tips you have regarding that?
Your leadership doesn't require a title. And I know a lot of people, that's why I started out with that conversation. People think, well, I can't be respected until I'm a manager. Nope. Take leading the small group, right? When there's a project, hey, I'll organize the meetings and I'll get us. I want people to be demonstrating the skills. It doesn't matter the title. And so if you are in your role and there's things that need to be done, you are like, if you are demonstrating initiative and organization and forethought, those are things that a good manager has. The other skills will come, right? So you'll get a chance to show someone that you know a P&L. You'll get a chance to show someone that you can manage technology or whatever the case. The what's, but managing people is an art as much as it is a skill, right? Because situational leadership, which I've practiced my entire career, no 2 people are the same, so you cannot manage people in a vacuum. Otherwise, they have to conform to you. A good leader knows when to conform to the people that they work with and for, and that they lead. And so whether it's practicing that in school, in organizations or clubs, that's one way to do it. And then, like I said, as you get out of school, doesn't matter the title. If it's like, all right, I'll organize that, I'll put that together. So give people a chance to see how well you do things.
Hi, I had another question. So I'm looking to get into the sports industry. I'm working towards building myself as a sports agent. It being like a male-dominated sort of industry, what would you sort of give me an advice on how would I market myself there to get into the industry and sort of build my career in it?
So the first thing I will tell you is find a mentor who's willing to teach you the industry. And so if you already know that you're going to be at a somewhat, and I won't even use the word disadvantage, you're going to be a unique entry in the market, use that to your advantage. So I remember I did a panel, gosh, it had to be when I opened Chester. So got maybe 2008 or 7 or something like that. And I did a panel, Wharton did a panel on sports and entertainment. And one of the guys that used to intern for me asked me to be on it. And I was on there it was only me 2 sports agents, right? All men. And we sat down, and one of the people in the audience said, how do you feel sitting around all these men? I said, this is my life. There's very little women generally in the casino industry. I've only ever worked in one place, 2 in my career, that had female leaders, like at the top. But I said, what happens is, especially now, it's really about, can I do the work that I'm called to do? So whether it's the legal side, right? So the actual agent part, or whether it's the administration part, am I administrating the careers? Find where you want to be and get a mentor who's already there. 80% of the people that have mentored me did not look like me. And that's why it's so important for me to do that for others, because I've always been like, until I got to a certain point in my career, most of my mentors were white males, because that's what I had. Now I'm fortunate because they were excited and driven and gave me good advice that I took. But I wasn't waiting to figure out who looked like me. And as I got further in my career, I started to find people that I could more connect with. So, right, I ended up joining an organization called Global Gaming Women. And like finding other people who had this unique story, and then joining the board a number of years later, because I'm like, this is what we need to do, and this is what we need to set forth. And so what I would say is find your tribe, but don't let doing that stop you from finding your mentor, right? So whether it's women in sports or women in entertainment, like whatever the group is that's going to help you, find it, but find the mentor where you are. Look who you want to be and find that person, and then let them help you get to that point. Because it's not an easy road, but it's less difficult than it used to be. Because I think the business world is starting to value the unique opportunities and the unique perspective that women bring to generally male-dominated industries. And that was not always the case.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, so I was just wondering, I know you're talking about your common theme and taking risks, but is there something that makes you want to take the risk? Like, is it because you're bored, or do you feel like you need to grow in your career?
So I would say a little bit of both. So if you are a driven individual, there's going to be something that starts to twitch, whether you're like, all right, it's time for me to do something different. You'll know in yourself. It's okay to feel comfortable, right? I want to say this is not, don't take risk for risk's sake, just because I'm like, oh, it's tomorrow, let's take another one. You'll get to a point in your career where you're thinking, okay, I'm not learning, I'm not growing. Or I'm learning and growing, but not in the ways that I want to. And so it is as much your job in propelling yourself as it is in the people that you're asking to help you. So there are times where people in HR were like, oh my God, you're so great. Do you want to just run a bigger hotel? And I was like, no, I told you I don't want to do that. But you'd be great. Okay, you're running a 300 room now. We have a 500 room that we're building. That's amazing. No, it's not what I want. Right? And so that's an opportunity where it's like, am I shooting a gift horse in the mouth because I'm getting a chance to get a promotion, but it's not where the promotion I want to be. And so, you know what, I'm going to sit tight for a little while. And when something comes, be ready for that. So I think, you know, like I said, don't take risk for risk alone. Think about a calculated risk. And part of it is, what do I have to lose? And that's always been my question. If what I have to lose is not as much as what I have to gain, it's a good risk. Because you will lose something. Every time you change, you lose something. Make sure you gain more than you lose.
I have another question. Given all of your experience and now with the current COVID world, are there any industries in particular that you would recommend to students that they explore?
Absolutely. So I just got off the phone privately. One of my best friends, we graduated from Pace together, and she works in Audible. And I was telling her, I was like, yeah, guess what I'm going to be? I'm going to be on this call with Pace. And so she ended up graduating from Pleasantville because she transferred out of New York. But women in technology and IT, she can't hire them fast enough. She can't find them. They don't exist with that cross section. So she had Lubin, but she also had this technology side that she went to graduate school for. That's that's a needle in a haystack, right? The digital analytics. A lot of what I do because of the casino industry, I'm very good at that. It's like a needle in a haystack to know digital analytics and operations, right? So from an industry, I will say I try to keep up. I think I came from I couldn't be at like more distinct ends of the spectrum, right? So gaming and hospitality, focus on, right, seniors, focus on discretionary, very male dominated, and in very small places. Healthcare, pediatric healthcare, it's all about kids. It's primarily women. It is not discretionary at all. You have to do this, right? In one way, shape, or form, whether it's emergent or regular. This is maintenance stuff that you have to do. And then the payer mix is different. So I would say that especially, like I said, technology, finance, even marketing, but it's the digital space. I find that I have trouble hiring people who really understand it. Even when I'm looking like, you know, a social person, it's not just about social media and using it. It's how are you using it to create experiences and content and engage users. It's not because it's fun, right? And so there's a line and there's an expertise, but there's ways to get that. And so I would say look at that, because especially the schools, and I always thought that Lubin especially is on the forefront because it's in the middle of the city of seeing what people want. And the one thing I loved, I had all of these adjunct professors who were doing the real work. Not because other places aren't, right? At Cornell, I loved it, but a lot of my professors weren't doing the real work. In the hotel school, they were doing a lot of projects. So, and it was a much smaller experience. So it was more tailored. But when I took my classes at Johnson, these are academians. Like, you are so disconnected from the real world sometimes. Pace, I never found that. They were always moonlighting or consulting or doing something else. And that keeps you connected. So when they have conversations with students, it's talking about what's really happening. And so that I always thought was really, really valuable. And I think that's just a unique thing that schools in urban environments that have large commuter populations, that's just a benefit. There's a lot of drawbacks, but that's a huge benefit that you have.
I suppose a follow-up to that would be, do you have any tips for students, for any seniors in the group as they get ready for graduation and start applying for jobs? Any tips for them?
Yes, I know it's desirable to let the money guide you. Ask the other questions. So let the money be the base. So I don't want you to be poor getting out of school, right? Because you all have student loans unless you're lucky. So let's take a base. But what should guide the job you choose is who am I going to be mentored? What is the exposure that I'm going to get? And am I really going to do work? Because I think that I have been very fortunate that I have had like real jobs, even right out of pace, real jobs, not jobs where I sort of sat and waited for somebody to give me a project. It was the other way around. I'm like, I can't do all the things you're asking me to do the other way. So you want to make sure that the early in your career that you're actually growing and you're actually learning. It doesn't even quite matter if you're not using the exact skills of your degree just yet, right? Because some people are like, well, this is my degree and I have to go into, you know, financial accounting modeling. And okay, hold on. That's a real narrow, widen it. And then as you get more advanced in your career, you can narrow. And so that's what I would say. Make sure that you want to work for the people who are hiring you. Because you're going to have to do it every day. And it gets real old real fast when they are not where you want to be. Because there are days when you're not going to want to do it.
Let me just piggyback on that a little bit and talk about, for those students who aren't seniors, maybe there's some sophomores and juniors here. You talked about the importance of the internship you had at JP Morgan. How important is that in the advice you'd give to these students, is to get internships and see what you like and what you don't like earlier as opposed to later?
Huge. So I had interned, I think at DHL. Again, I always had an on-campus job. I interned with a law firm. So I did so many things. And then literally I thought I had hit the gold mine because I was making more money than all my friends at this summer job. I had the resume, I had the title and the position and the company in 3 weeks. And I'm like, nope, shoot me. If I had not done that, I probably would have gone in, because they paid the best, right? At the time, I probably would have gone into a role with them after graduation and then been miserable and felt compelled to stay for years. So what I think that the PACE experience really gives you is the chance to try things on for yourself. And like I said, every time I'm like, all right, ready for something. And then at the time, right, I think juniors have to start working in their field or some internship in my program, you had to sort of try that. And so that's where I was like, yeah, okay, this is hard, but I like this. And this is hard and I like this. And what was different for me is I liked doing the work. I didn't like sitting in an office without the interaction. So that's where I realized how operations was important to me. So and what's, again, transferable, I'm in the hospital, I see the work that I get to do. Some people don't necessarily want that. That's just not what they value. I want to be able to walk outside and see the work that I'm getting to do. And so some of those things are what you experience early. And, you know, and like John's question, like you also want to be able to develop as many relationships with people in industry as you can.
Let me thank you very much for being with us today. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I know the students got as much out of this as I did, certainly. It's a pleasure to meet with you. We have a small token of appreciation for you participating today. Unfortunately, I can't hand it to you through the Zoom. Please look for something at your address soon. But thank you very much for spending time with us today. And I want to thank all the students for being here too. And have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you. It was my pleasure, you guys. Enjoy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.